So let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
We're going to be watching that very carefully, and a lot of people are saying he's here illegally. We're going to look at everything, and ideally, he's going to turn out to be much less than a communist. But right now, he's a communist. That's not a socialist.
Radical Zohran Mamdani officially becomes Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. President Trump already coming after him, and he should. The entire party in a panic because this could be their future, which would be not a nationwide platform to win elections on.
Number 2.
I think it's anti-American. I think the fact that you're going to have individuals and populations in there that are stacked on top of each other, many of whom are without due process.
There's nothing about this facility, about this detention camp, that is not cruel and inhumane.
Really? That is so true. Immigration, a success story being written by President Trump as they talk about Operation Alcatraz over in Florida, a place to put the illegal immigrants who are on their way out of the country. There's controversy we'll discuss.
Number 1.
It's the most conservative piece of legislation we've ever worked on. You need to mention at the same time that even though while we're having historic tax cuts, we also have historic savings. We're going to save $1.6 trillion for the American people.
There it is, Speaker of the House, hoping to get it through the House. The bill, the big, beautiful bill, back in the House after a dramatic win in the Senate, 51-50, but they changed some of it, and some people are not happy about it. What aren't they happy about? Well, if you look at some of the caucuses, the House caucus, it looks like some people are not happy. For example, Congressman Andy Ogles, he said, an unelected staffer, meaning a parliamentarian, appointed by a Democrat, meaning Harry Reid, rushed through an unfinished bill just so they could go home for July 4th. Their bill, meaning the Senate's, forces Tennesseans to pay for illegal aliens' health care. The House bill ended this. Why did the Senate keep it in? I'm not sure why they kept it in. I think the parliamentarian made a rule on that. Obviously, that's ridiculous, but these Democratic states want to pay for it, like California. So who else is upset about it on the big, beautiful bill? You have Ralph Norman of South Carolina. He says he does not expect to vote for the Senate version and opposes advancing it. Chip Roy of Texas warned the odds passing the entire package before the July 4th deadline after the Senate altered its House version are a hell of a lot lower than they were 48 hours ago. You notice he didn't kill it, but you know who did kill it? Elon Musk. He said at least $38 billion in government contracts, loans and subsidies and tax credits. That's good to be looking at. Since 2007, that's what the president's looking at because he ripped the bill. He said it's the worst thing ever. He's going to help Thomas Massie get reelected if the president tries to primary him. And he says he's not going to support any Republican that voted for this bill. Here is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Cut 2.
This is the signature piece of President Trump's domestic agenda. This is more than a tax bill because it also includes border, it includes defense, it includes school choice. And I just had a meeting with some of the House Democrats, the Freedom Caucus, and I can tell you that group should be so proud of themselves. They have changed the center of gravity in the debate. We are going to start paying down debt. We're going to grow the economy, and they were big contributors to this. So I believe that at the end of the day, they will be there for President Trump and give Speaker Johnson the ability to move this bill to the president's desk for signing this Friday.
All right, this just in because it affects the economy. And this is what I heard. Once the big, beautiful bill passes, even though it's almost passed, got to pass the House, a trade deal has been done with Vietnam. After speaking with their leader, the highly respected General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, it'll be a great deal of cooperation between the two countries. The terms are the Vietnam will pay the United States 20% tariff on any or all goods into our territory and 40% tariff on any transshipping. In return, Vietnam will do something that they have never done before, give the United States of America total access to their markets for trade. In other words, they will open their market to the United States, meaning they will be able to sell our products into Vietnam at a zero tariff. In my opinion, that is sometimes referred to as the larger engine vehicles, which does so well in the United States and a wonderful addition to the various products. So I hope that's good for things like Untuck It, because I know they make their shirts there. I hope it's not cost prohibitive. back to the bill itself, here's Tom Emmer, the House Majority Whip. Can he get it done? Cut 7.
The president wants the bill as is. Wants it on his desk by Independence Day. He wants to sign this thing and deliver on the promises that he made to the American people. And if you look at the bill, it basically is 85% of what the House sent over. So there are some changes, but I think they're changes that the president has adopted. He likes the bill. He wants the bill passed. We're going to get it done tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, and tomorrow is today. So we'll see what's going to happen. Look, the president surprised everyone. The Speaker of the House got it done by Memorial Day. The Senate got it passed before 4th of July. The question is, can they get it thoroughly passed, both bodies, without going back to the Senate, because you can't go back to the Senate again? Can they get it passed and go through now? Now, everybody else on every other channel is just ripping this package. Very few people have read 940 pages, I am sure. And most of those people had no problem with the new Green Deal that got jammed down our throats, the rescue package that was totally unnecessary because they say the pandemic needed it. No, Joe Biden needed it. Here's what CBS said. Cut 18.
Finally landed after a 4-hour delay.
The weather didn't stop House members from traveling to D.C.
I'm not going to chance being stuck in Myrtle Beach in this historic opportunity.
Ahead of today's critical vote on President Trump's tax and spending bill.
My flights got canceled, and so we're going to drive overnight.
Illinois Representative Raha Krishnamurthy hosted a Zoom town hall on his drive to the nation's capital after his flight was canceled.
We got some snacks, and away we go to Washington, D.C. And so wish me luck. In 14 hours, I'll be there. So if these Democrats aren't able to get there and there's a vote, that could be the difference. And I know they had some who had passed away, and that was one of the reasons it passed the House. So they want to see who's going to get there. And we know the weather has been crazy, and the airports have been basically shut down. So they want to make sure these Democratic House members that they're there to vote it down and make the Republicans all show up and vote with it, or else Speaker Johnson will put it forward and that'll be it. You're not here, let's go. But he's not going to put it forward. Tom Emmer's not going to support it. Steve Scalise won't be behind it if they don't have the numbers there.
Senator Paul said that that your vote was a bailout for Alaska at the expense of the rest of the country.
Oh my.
That's what Senator Paul said.
I said it was easy.
I didn't say it, ma'am. I'm just asking for your response.
My response is I have an obligation to the people of the state of Alaska. When people suggest that federal dollars go to one of our 50 states in a, quote, bailout, I find that offensive. Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill. I don't like that.
Really? So if you can't get a bill that advantages 330 million people, I don't think you should pass it. It's unbelievable. I mean, the stare that she gave to this reporter, I don't know who he is, just looked like she wanted to bite his head off. That's why he followed up and said, I'm just telling you what Rand Paul said. But Murkowski got in there and got her hands dirty. She rolled up her sleeves and got something done. Rand Paul doesn't. They came to his office and they said, what can we do to get you on this bill? He said, nothing. Don't want anything. That to me is not doing your job. Let's bring in Chad Pergram. Chad knows everything. Chad, what's going to happen today?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, and I appreciate you suggesting that I'm a sage or a soothsayer here, but I really don't know what's going to happen today. What I will tell you is that they don't seem to have the votes right now to pass this bill. That could change. These things always evolve, but if they had the votes, they would go ahead and probably vote. Right now, they're on a procedural debate and then a procedural vote, and if that goes down, that will be a signal. It's a test. That will say they don't have the votes. You can't actually get onto the bill if they're not able to get this across the finish line. And I can give you a range of anywhere from 12 to about 30 members who are against this. And, I reported this morning that they said unless there is some divine promise from the president or some executive action that comes from that, they're not going to vote for this. Now, some of this is natural. Let's be clear here that you always have holdouts at the end on big pieces of legislation because they want to get their promise or their thing. It's an opportunity. It's an inflection point. So you just don't go along. You get something out of this. Look what happened yesterday, and you heard it in the soundbite with Lisa Murkowski. There was something that she wanted. She actually got things for her state. This is a lot of horse trading. And with Senator Paul, his thing that he wanted, he did not get. He said, I will vote for the bill, although there were plenty of things about it he didn't like if you remove the debt ceiling increase. But Lisa Murkowski actually came out pretty well for her state. And that reporter, by the way, that's Ryan Nobles. Ryan Nobles, who's the congressional correspondent for NBC and MSNBC.
So what changed? They say it's 85% of the bill, right? 85% of what the Senate was in.
The tax provisions are similar. Yes.
Right. So what has got the Republicans so upset in the House?
Well, I think that they don't like the fact that the Alaska provision is in there. That's something that ticked them off. I think that the fact that the bill evolved so much. I mean, there was a bigger debt ceiling increase in the bill. And then you have Chip Roy, who, and we've talked about this, and this is really in the weeds, but it's very important when they talk about the baseline that they're using for evaluating the tax cuts and the damage it may or may not do to the deficit. He argued last night in the Rules Committee and voted against it getting out of the Rules Committee. He said it's a gimmick. He said this is a stunt. He said we're fooling ourselves. So if you put him together with, say, Thomas Massey and a couple of other people right there, you don't have the votes. And I can give you a lot more, even moderate Republicans who have trouble because they think that some of these cuts were too steep, especially as Medicaid and Medicare.
So some people are upset that, I guess, is there funding for illegal immigrants in this bill? Because one of the Republicans said they said to put that back in.
Well, they tried twice to put a provision in there that would have in the Senate, and it couldn't meet parliamentary muster with the Senate parliamentarian. Now, that was in the original House bill, and the reason it's in the House bill is that they don't have to comply with these special budget rules that the Senate has. And so the House can just say, well, why are we not having that in there? And then, as I say, blame the umpire.
Parliamentarian.
The Senate has agreed to have that as an umpire to comply with their budget rules.
Here's what Andy Harris said, the congressman from Maryland, cut 6.
I don't think the votes are there, just like they weren't in the Senate initially until some concessions were made. We'll get there eventually, but I don't think it's going to be in the next couple days.
So, Chad, if they do make some concessions, it has to go back to the Senate again, right? They can't do that.
That's right. That's right. And again, you're not going to get that done before the 4th of July. They're going to be lucky to get this done in the next 24, 48 hours. They do like stacking these things up against a deadline like the 4th of July or Christmas because it forces people to take action. But you're not going to get the whole thing done. The real deadline, if you're going to include the debt ceiling, is early August because that's the deadline for that. And then the question is, sometimes I've seen this with bills that you have bills that you can have one version pass the House and another pass the Senate, but you can never, ever, ever get on the same page.
I think it happened with the immigration at one point with George W. Bush.
Yeah, that certainly. Well, it happened in 2013. You had, the immigration bill. It was a bipartisan coalition. Marco Rubio was involved in this. John McCain was involved in this. Dick Durbin was involved in this. But they never tried to put it actually up on the House floor in that case. But there's been other things that were, smaller potatoes where you just can't, get it resolved for some reason. Not as high profile issues as say immigration or the big beautiful bill. But what you could do is the House could amend it and send it back. This is what I call ping pong, where they're ping ponging the bill back and forth between the House and Senate, and that takes a long time. The other option, and John Thune has kind of signaled maybe he's not too hep to this, is to go to a conference committee. So the House passed its bill already, the Senate passed its bill, and so you take a congressional blender, really, but then you produce a conference report, which is an amalgamation of both the House and Senate bills, and the House and Senate have to pass that conference report. It's just another version of the bill. And
Wow.
that can be hard too.
It's unbelievable. Chad Pergram, thanks so much. A lot of moving parts. Unlikely today, but we're close to the big,
We'll
beautiful
see.
bill.
We'll
see.
know tonight.
All right. Thanks so much. Joining us now is General H.R. McMaster, former National Security Advisor for Donald Trump's first administration, Hoover Institute Senior Fellow, and author of At War with Ourselves, My Tour of Duty in the Trump White House. Now it might be different now. General, welcome back.
Hey, Brian, great to be with you.
All right. First off, let me give you an idea. There's so many different things happening right now. There's just a report out that it looks like we're going to stop sending Patriot missiles over to Ukraine because we're running low, along with certain artillery. I find that an excuse not to arm the Ukrainians. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think that's what it is, Brian. There are certain people, who are in the president's ear, like trying to tell him that, hey, this is Europe's thing, and we don't really have a stake in this. But hey, Brian, what they're missing is the connection between Vladimir Putin and the other leaders of the axis of evils. You know why they need those Patriots and other capabilities? Because North Korea has given them 8 million artillery rounds to the Russians. They fought alongside them. The Iranians gave them these Shahed drones, which Moscow has now modified, and they're targeting apartment buildings and hospitals and schools in Ukraine. And guess who's underwriting the whole effort? China. And so a lot of the people are making this kind of prioritizing argument that, hey, this is Europe's thing. We have to focus on China. It's all interconnected, Brian. And, and the Ukrainians are demonstrating tremendous valor and fighting in our interest against this axis of aggressors.
It looks to be the Undersecretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby, who you might be familiar with. He, like other people, totally against our involvement with the Ukraine war. I don't think they see the big picture like you just mentioned. That's just a small portion of it. And now all of a sudden he realizes and Jennifer Griffin's reporting, we have frozen shipments of critical weapons to Ukraine, including Patriot interceptors and 155 millimeter shells. At a pivotal time because they say we are running low. Do we need Patriots at this moment? And is it possible that we could protect ourselves with the Patriots that you think we have?
Absolutely, Brian. There's been some really good work on this. If you go to the Foundation of Defense and Democracy, they go through every critical weapon system and show, what's in stock and what needs to happen to ramp up production. It is true that our defense industrial base is atrophied, and that's one of President Trump's priorities. But we can do this, and we have co-production with some countries. For example, in Japan, they produce some of these Patriot weapon systems. They've just approved that they can export to Taiwan some of these systems. So, hey, it's like an all-hands-on-deck moment, Hey, we used to be the arsenal of democracy. Remember that in World War II, Hey, let's be Americans, not Americans, Brian. We can do this.
So the North Koreans are bringing, I think, up to 30,000 more troops over. I mean, they're basically all coming back in caskets. As you see the North Korean leader seeing the caskets come back. Now they're getting experience fighting. Their word is they are improving. But the Russians are losing to 300 to 400 a day. Can you imagine this? If America was losing 300 guys a day?
Yeah, Brian, this is Putin's ruse, right? He's trying to look strong. He's throwing it all in right now because he thinks we don't have the will to support Ukraine. And he thinks that's going to affect Ukraine psychologically. And now is his moment. So, as you mentioned, I mean, they're taking 30,000, 40,000 casualties a month. And by the way, Putin is really in a hurt in terms of his economic situation, right? He's sitting on top of piles of cash he can't convert. He's spending about 49% of his budget on defense is not sustainable. Hey, oil prices are going down, so he's not pulling as much out of the ATM as he's been able to pull. And I think now's the time to be in a position of strength. And by the way, Putin has really disrespected President Trump the whole time, and thinks he can play him. I don't think he can play Donald Trump. You saw what happened, with the Iranians. He gave him 60 days, right? And they went to 61, and he acted. Remember what Kim Jong-un thought he could get everything he wanted from Donald Trump in the Hanoi summit in Trump's first administration, and Donald Trump walked out. So I think President Trump is going to come to the conclusion it's time to put more pressure on Putin, and that includes sustaining support for the Ukrainians.
Lindsey Graham thinks the president's close to allowing that Senate bill, which was, I think, got over 80 votes, to go in to put additional sanctions on Putin. And he could use that as a lever, use that as leverage and say, guys, I'm just going to sign this. This is the Senate. They're going to put additional sanctions on him. Some just roll their eyes when I say sanctions. Are you one of them?
No, I'm not, because, in fact, we did a study here at the Hoover Institution that I recommend on sanctions, what effects of sanctions. I'll send you the link to that, Brian. But, I'll tell you, it's really how they're implemented and how. What President Trump showed is, hey, on Iran, it's not military force or diplomacy or military force or sanctions. It's how you integrate all those elements of national power. That's what needs to happen in all elements of foreign policy. Sanctions are a part of the answer. They're not the answer.
All right, let's talk about Iran. I haven't talked to you about the operation. You must have known this operation existed and the capabilities that our B-2 bombers had and the bunker busters were revealed to have. Your thoughts about the operation when you left it and how it was executed when you saw it?
Hey, it was executed brilliantly. This I'd love to see, obviously, the professionalism, the courage of our armed forces. And also, you've got to also give credit to the Israelis for what they did to dismantle the air defense system and then to go after the nuclear supply chain, to also go after the missile capabilities and to go after some of the leadership, the critical leadership within the RGC, as well as the scientists and so forth. But, I'll tell you, I think that was an important message to our adversaries. Who else can fly a 37-hour round trip and put 30,000-pound bombs down ventilation shafts, and to do that as part of an overall strike package that included, submarine-launched cruise missiles. So it was a fantastic display of American military prowess, and it was a righteous mission, Brian. You got to look at the nature of the Iranian regime, right? What they say. They call us the Great Satan. They've killed, thousands of Americans over the years through their proxies. They want to destroy Israel and wipe them off the map. Hey, you can't let Ayatollah Khamenei get the most destructive weapons on earth.
What do we find out about their defensive ability, their offensive ability, and their vulnerability?
Well, they've always been weak, Brian, but they act strong because we never act like we know what the return address is. And, I wrote this essay recently about the folly of de-escalation, and Donald Trump ended it. What you always heard from multiple U.S. administrations, all of them maybe except Donald Trump's, his first one and his second one, that every time Iran attacks us, we're like, oh, we have to de-escalate. Well, you know what that did, Brian? It gave Iran the ability to escalate on their own terms with impunity. Donald Trump broke that trend, when he killed Qasem Soleimani in January of 2020. And again, with this strike, he showed that he's willing to act directly against the regime.
I want you to hear what the Iranian ambassador to the UN said on Sunday, cut 42.
Our peaceful nuclear activity will remain always in peaceful manner. So the enrichment is our right, an inalienable right, and we want to implement this right.
So you do plan to restart enrichment, that sounds like.
I think that enrichment will never stop.
So if they start, and they're at Fordo now, trying to see how bad the damage is, and I imagine it being significant, do you think that the Israelis are just going to bomb it away as they start to make some progress?
Yes. Yes, I do. And so this is why, Iran's got to make a decision, do you take the risk of restarting the program? It's material intensive. And when that Israel and probably the United States will strike it again. And of course, Brian, they could strike it, with their Air Force as they have, but they could also go after them with clandestine capabilities. You saw an astonishing range of capabilities that included intelligence and direct action, covert operations, as well as these airstrikes.
So right now we might go, I guess, talking to them again. We'll see what happens. But now there's pressure, and I think I think they're on the same page. There's a push now to de-escalate in Gaza, and they said the ceasefire is on the table. Essentially, they've wiped out all the leadership, including one of the founders of Hamas, but Hamas is still in Gaza. We got to get the hostages out. Hamas has got this deal, the details of which I guess the U.S. side and the Israelis have. What do you think is going to happen there? What would you like to see happen there?
Well, what I'd like to see is Hamas give up all the hostages now, right? The ones who are living and the ones who they killed.
In exchange for prisoners?
I don't know what the outline of the deal would be. That would be up, I think, to the Israelis to decide, but you got to get the people out of there. Right now the IDF is controlling, has kind of loose control over about 75% of Gaza. It's the remaining 25%, probably where those hostages are, and probably where there are a significant number still of Hamas terrorists. But you know what, Brian, when you look at this long term too, near-term objective, get the hostages back. Long-term is you've got to destroy Hamas. I hear people say, oh, well, you can't kill an idea. Hey, as long as Hamas has the guns in Gaza, nothing good can happen for the Palestinian people in Gaza. So what you need, first of all, to have a relief valve so some of the Palestinians can get the hell out of there into a humanitarian facility, maybe in the Sinai temporarily. The next thing you need to do is destroy Hamas and get a peace enforcement force in there that can prevent them from coming back. Because until you do that, nobody's going to be the mayor of Gaza, Brian. You're going to get a bullet in the head. And you can't have Hamas in charge because you know what? They're dedicated to the destruction of Israel. It is so hypocritical when I hear people say, well, we have to get back on a path to a two-state solution and we need to stop fighting against Hamas. Hey, Hamas has to go as a precondition for getting on the path to any kind of an enduring peace between the Israelis and Israel and the Palestinians.
General, it must be surreal to you to see these signs in Syria that say, thank you, President Trump. And you have a leader, the president shook his hand and talked to him. I know he's a terrorist. He was a terrorist. He said he changed his ways. How do you feel about President Trump's bold move and somewhat of a risk to say, welcome aboard, we're lifting the sanctions?
Yeah, it's a risk, Brian, but the alternative would be to not have any influence or not have much influence maybe after what happens next in Syria. Syria shattered during the civil war like a light bulb. And so that society's got to be kind of put back together. And it can only be put that back together if they end the sectarian civil war within that country. Us having leverage over al-Shari, the leverage we have, along with the especially the Saudis and the Emiratis, and to agree the Qataris, because we have to kind of pull them into this, is just to not write checks. Don't write checks to them to rebuild. And so what that should be is, hey, al-Shara, you need a pluralistic government, right? You need to ensure that these minority populations, like we just saw Christians mass murdered, like we saw Druze mass murdered, are protected, and that you get to some kind of a political process that's going to give all Syrians a say in how they're governed over the next couple of years. But what we don't want to see is another theocratic dictatorship in there or a caliphate, right? That's going to consolidate gains and then try to export, a kind of this, this radical Islamist ideology.
You could argue, General, that that Russia had taken their eye off the ball in Syria, taking assets out of there, allowed for these rebels to go back and take back the country. So Assad had to run for his life. So as they've had to focus on the Ukraine, there goes the ripple effect. And Iran loses a passageway for arms, and they lose an ally. Real quick.
Yeah, well, this is really an important dimension of it. And Russia now is trying to double down on its so-called Africa Corps in North Africa and also move into Eastern Libya. I think we ought to help people contest that. The other thing is, too, it's important to remember, Assad collapsed because Israel kicked the hell out of Hezbollah. And Assad was really even more reliant on Hezbollah and an Iranian proxy army than he was on the Russians.
General, we have to do a whole tutorial and do 4 hours on this. There's so many moving parts, and it's always great to talk to you about it. So, General H.R. McMaster, thank you.
Do you condemn that phrase, globalize the Intifada?
That's not language that I use. The language that I use and the language that I will continue to use to lead this city is that which speaks clearly to my intent, which is an intent grounded in a belief in universal human rights.
Do you condemn that phrase, globalize the Intifada, which a lot of people hear as a call to violence against Jews?
I don't believe that the role of the mayor is to police speech in the manner.
Very quickly, for the people who care about the language and who feel really concerned by that phrase, why not just condemn it?
Ultimately, it's not language that I use. It's language I understand there are concerns about.
Is this unbelievable? He will not walk back into a globalized intifada. I don't use it, but I support it. and look at other stuff that he said in the past, and look at the fact that he was arrested October 8th, the day after Israel's the attack inflicted on Israel. He's protesting against Israel, and one of 2 lawmakers that got arrested. That's the guy the Democrats have nominated to be mayor of New York City. It is detrimental to their political fortunes, let alone to the city I'm in my view. How does Karl Rove feel about it? He's a former deputy chief of staff under George W. Bush, Fox News contributor, best-selling author. Karl, when you heard this and have been hearing this and hearing these sound bites roll back, what are your thoughts about this guy?
Well, obviously he has previously used that language.
Of course.
He's previously said that, and I really love it. The job of a mayor is not to police the language. Well, let me ask you something. If some bigot showed up and started yelling racist things in the city of New York, do you think as mayor he would condemn that? And he should. But the fact that the man who aspires to be the mayor of one of the great cities in the world cannot bring himself to disparage, criticize, or disavow a phrase that talks about the globalization of the Intifada. The Intifada, 1,200 Jews in Israel died in the Intifada. And this guy wants to globalize it. Well, what do you think that means? And the fact that he will not condemn it and disavow it, or even consider apologizing for having used the phrase in the past, speaks volumes about who he is and what he would do.
He's also a socialist who's also leaning towards a Marxist. Listen to this.
What do you mean leaning towards a Marxist? He is a Marxist.
I want you to hear this about billionaires.
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
Yeah, if I could just take some of their money, I'll work with them.
Yeah, take a lot of their money. I mean, come on.
What are we supposed to do? I mean, we're sitting there. Yeah. He just won by 13 points over defamed and disgraced Andrew Cuomo. But it's not really about Cuomo. Any traditional Democrat would have lost to this guy because he outworked them, to his credit. And he got young people out there, those same people that we see protesting at NYU, at City College, at Columbia University, at New School. Those are the ones that voted for this guy.
Yeah, well, look, though, first of all, he is a Marxist. I mean, I love the language. They have too much money. Look, we all believe in equality. We believe in equality before the law. We believe that everybody has an equal chance to apply themselves and achieve things. But this guy says if you achieve things, I'm going to hold it against you, and I've got, in my mind, an arbitrary amount that everybody should have, and anybody who's got more than that, let's pull them down. Let's not, let's take success and penalize it. And that's what is at the essence of Marxism. The belief that everybody needs to have the same drab existence that people had during the height of the Soviet Union. And I mean, this guy is a communist. Let's not kid ourselves. He is a Marxist. That's how he views the world, and that's how he would govern. That's why he could say we ought to have free buses, we ought to have free universal child care. We ought to have, I loved it when he explained, we're going to have city-run grocery stores, and they're going to be cheaper because they won't have to pay rent or taxes. Well, first of all, how can they get away with being someplace in a physical structure and not paying some rent or purchasing that building? And isn't it ironic that he says they'll succeed because they don't have to pay the taxes that private companies will? Those companies pay those taxes in order to provide the services that the people of New York want.
So we're talking to Karl Rove, obviously. Karl, so you have a situation. Tell me if you ever remember anything like this. Hakeem Jeffries, Gillibrand, Schumer, all have not endorsed him. I haven't heard anything from Dan Goldman, the New York liberal Jewish Democrat in New York. I don't know. Nadler, where are you? Congressman, Democrat in New York, Jewish? Yeah,
Nadler endorsed him. I saw very positive comments by Nadler, which I think is covering his flank in the Democratic congressional primary next year. But look, let's go back to this. You're right. This guy is attractive. He's young. He conducted a savvy campaign. He put off a good vibe. But let's also be honest. He was running against Andrew Cuomo. Talk about yesterday's news. Talk about a guy who ran a terrible campaign. Talk about somebody who did not come across as energetic and forward-looking and enthusiastic and got a vision. Say what you will. Mamdani had a vision, and he made it look exciting. And, yes, he drew young people to him. But I don't think the protesters at the colleges that you mentioned represent the majority of students on those campuses. I don't. I think a lot of people sat this race out. A lot of people came out because of the excitement. A lot of people came out because, it was an open race. But I still think a lot of New York City Democrats said, you know what, I don't have very good choices. And I bet there are a lot of people who said, you know what, he's a little bit more left-wing than I am, but boy, is he exciting and fresh and new, and doesn't he have, some interesting appeal? And they may have said, the only good thing about it is he's going to have to go to Albany for a lot of these changes that he wants, and he's not going to get them.
Well, if he has to leave the city council is as left-wing as him. But Albany maybe is a little bit different, but they still dominate, I think, with the supermajority for Democrats. So I want to ask you, Karl, if you're a Democrat right now, let's say you're James Carville and level-headed thinking guy like David Axelrod, who you know, are you saying to yourself, man, I got to chart a future, and this might be the highest profile win we have, and this can't be the future for the country? We will die on the vine if this is the type of nominee we attract?
Well, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Me, I've got a different view. I think the Democrats in Texas ought to invite him here and have him campaign across the state in order to help share his vision for the future of the Democratic Party. I think it would be enormously helpful. I think he ought to go to every critical battleground state. He ought to go to Georgia. He ought to go to North Carolina. I think this message is one that will be well received in Aroostook County, Maine. I think this is exactly what the Democrats ought to do. Let's put him out there now and have him be the future, the face of the future of the Democratic Party. I think we'll learn pretty damn quick how enthusiastic the people in middle America are about that. Yeah, let's do that.
So Joe Crowley was upset by AOC, and he was heading towards maybe being the next speaker, and he got upset. Same way Eric Cantor got upset. Maybe they got a little lethargic and got they were assuming that they were just going to get reelected. They didn't. So he was a great booking for Brett Baer last night. Here's what he said about this. Cut 36.
I don't think that this election in New York City does transpose to across the country. What works in New York City sometimes doesn't work in the middle of Kansas, for instance, or where my wife is from. My wife Casey's from Montana. It's not going to work in Montana either. I think we can look at this election, learn from it as well.
He says it's not going to be a nationwide thing, but Democrats have to find a leader. They got rid of David Hogg. Okay, goodbye. And now they got rid of this guy. So, Karl, I want to talk about the big, beautiful bill. Do you think that it'll pass the House? Should it pass the House?
Well, I think it will pass the House, but it's going to require the president to twist some arms and for them to talk about some things that could follow that might make we have one group of people who represent sort of lower income districts where Medicaid is enormously important and popular, and they're concerned about the cuts to Medicaid. And then we have people who are concerned about the deficit and the debt, and they think there's too much spending in the bill. So there's going to have to be something. You probably can't solve all of those concerns in the negotiations and on the bill itself. You're going to have to commit to doing some things in the aftermath of it to get some of those people to come aboard. But it's going to require the president, and it's going to require a lot of political credit, to be drawn down out of his political bank in order to get it done.
You like it? You like it?
Well, I like. Look, it's not my bill; it's his bill. I like the restoration of his 2017 tax cuts. I like making some of the pro-growth elements of it permanent, because I think one of the most important things that the Republican Party can do is increase the prosperity of our country by growing the economy, at a faster rate than it has been growing by reducing regulation, drawing on America's great strengths like the energy industry and cutting taxes in a way that it causes people who create jobs and build businesses to invest money, hire more people, and pay them better. So I like a lot of those elements. I also like some of the stuff we're doing on Medicaid, but we better have the president out there defending it. I mean, where are the three big savings in Medicaid? They come from saying that the able-bodied people who are on Medicaid, who don't have children, have got to work. And if you're not willing to work or be looking for work, you don't deserve to have the support of the taxpayers. I agree with that. I think most Americans agree with that. The second thing that it does is it says illegal immigrants should not be able to receive free health care through Medicaid. Yeah. And again, you and I are both big proponents of legal immigration, but I think you and I also agree if you're an illegal immigrant, you should not have the right to get free health care that's not available to every other American. So no health care for no Medicaid for illegal aliens. And finally, the other big change is it says states should be able to review their rolls to find ineligible people whenever they want. The Biden administration said, no, we don't want the states to be checking their rolls on as frequently as they like in order to find people who are ineligible. Well, it's just common sense. The states ought to have the right to go out there and check the rolls.
They're asking for
whenever they want. To make certain that people are not on the rolls. Because they call it improper payments. Even the advocates of Medicaid agree that there are hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of decades in inappropriate Medicaid payments. And it's not just people getting on the system in order to get checks. We just had the administration, the Department of Justice is indicted a lot of people who've been stealing money out of Medicaid and Medicare by
other countries.
By fraud. Yeah. So other countries, right? Exactly. So look, but to win this argument, it requires the President of the United States to get out there and make the case to the American people. So getting the bill passed is only part of it. He's then got to get out there and sell it.
Got it. So I want to get, you are a great balls and strikes guy. You don't think Trump does everything right or wrong. You just call it like you see it, and you're a conservative guy and a political expert. I'm just going to roll off some of the things the president has accomplished. NATO is committed to spending 5%. University of Pennsylvania, trans men, you lose, go apologize. Virginia president, you're Mr. DEI, you're out. Canada, you try to tax our tax companies, the deal's off. They stopped doing that. How about deals with the UK, now Vietnam, and a framework for China? Tariffs, revenue up to $162 billion. Supreme Court neutralizes the district court. He beats CBS, and they have a pledge to publish transcript of political leaders for now on after their interviews. The Build Back Better's on the doorstep of success. The market hit an all-time high. They destroyed, for now, Iran's nuke program. Massive crackdown on TDA. Border crossings down to almost zero. This is a pretty impressive list.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that give me some queasiness, but it is a very impressive list, and a lot of it is very positive. You left out something.
What?
The border. The fact that
zero crossings.
He was absolutely right that we didn't need new laws. We just needed a new president to enforce the laws that are on the books and to say to people, you come here illegally, you're not going to be let into this country. You're going to be returned to where you came from. I do have a little bit of concerns. UVA forcing out the president. What happens if a future liberal president says, you know what, you're the president of, let's say, Texas A&M University, and you're too conservative, and you will not allow, blah, 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 or blah, blah, blah on campus. And says, you know what, we're going to cut off funds to you unless you're out. Makes me a little concerned. One of the great successes in there that is an important one for his political standing, you mentioned it, the trade deal with Vietnam. It sets the model, and the model is make certain that they are able to sell us. Look, we're not going to be making jeans in the United States. We're not going to be making tennis shoes. But we're not going to be doing T-shirts. But when the importance of getting the deal done with Vietnam and with Myanmar and Bangladesh and the Philippines and other sources of inexpensive clothing is that when kids get ready to go back to school, their parents are not going to walk in. It was a 46% tariff on Vietnam. You walk in
Inflation.
to buy your kids' schools, and get that bill. That would redound to the disadvantage of the Republicans and of the administration. So yes, good that we're getting that stuff done. I frankly don't understand. The president's attitude is we're running a deficit with a lot of countries when it comes to trade, and the reason is because they're screwing us. They're not treating us fairly. Well, Britain runs a trade deficit with the United States. That is to say, we buy less from them than they buy from us, and yet we're still going to stick them with a 10% tariff. Aren't they supposed to be thinking the U.S. is messing us over like we say that a lot of countries are?
I don't know, but the market seems – a good point, but the market seems to love it so far. Karl Rove, you're the best.